Hey guys, every generation have a purpose or lack thereof. I remember when I was growing up in the 70s, there was it was the ending era of the hippie era. And the hippie era in the 60s, I was just a little girl. So when I came to North America, I was preteen in the 70s. And it was the aftermath of the Vietnam War, the peace and love, and the protesting. People wanted the war to end, and that's what they were protesting. And of course, the Black Panthers were protesting against the killing of black men and women in their neighborhoods on the streets. And so they were up in arms with the American society. And moving forward from that era, that was the 70s. And then I believe the 80s, it was the me generation. And the 90s and the 2000s. And so I found, just examining the previous eras, that as we move from decade to decade, Black people have stopped protesting. We are laid back. We think we've made it, because going back to the 70s, the 50s and the 60s was Dr. Martin Luther King March on Washington, etc., Montgomery boycott. And so we think now, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000 to 2022, we are so laid back and complacent. We think that we have made it and don't have a care in the world because we're making maybe 50 cents more, a dollar more than our parents made. And I was listening to a speech by Professor Lumumba. He is from Africa. And his speech had to do with the state of Pan-Africanism, where we are as a people, because you guys know whatever happens in Africa affects all Black people around the world. And so he was talking about the state of Pan-Africanism. And I don't hear anyone talking about it today in terms of moving the goalposts a little further up for our people to have an even playing field in this society. Some of the members, or some of the people who were members of the Pan-African movement, I'm just going to mention 4 so that you guys can understand how important Pan-Africanism was and still is. I'm talking about the first person on my list, not the first person who became a member of Pan-Africanism. The first person was Marcus Garvey. Then we got to W.E. Du Bois. The third person on my list is Kwame Nkrumah. Last but not least, and not in the order of importance, but it's just how I compiled the list. Dr. Martin Luther King. Those were just some of the members of the Pan-African movement. They believed in it. And so today, we have Black people all around the world who don't believe in nothing. They're not fighting for nothing. They're not marching for nothing. They are so complacent and so fulfilled and just self-absorbed and content that they think that they've made it. There was a little pocket of protest when George Floyd was murdered, but that was just a little pocket. And then we got quiet again. We're not moving the goalposts any. But this is just part of his speech and a little bit of what he had to say on the state of Black folks, Black leaders. Here's Professor Lumumba.
Nobody cares about us. And brothers and sisters, if you want to know how weak we are, and we are weak, look at how we are treated. Last month, the world met in New York, the General Assembly. When African heads of states and government are speaking, the hall is empty. Nobody bothers, because they are saying nothing. Even if they are saying something, it is something that can be ignored. Compare when an African head of state and government is speaking and when the Prime Minister of Little Israel is speaking. They will listen because we are weak and disunited. So we have a weak continent because the spirit of Pan-Africanism disappeared. So the question that we can ask, what is the state of Pan-Africanism as we speak today? The African Union, which is weak, says the right things and does the wrong things 9 out of 10 times. And what are the critical areas in which we are weak? We are weak politically because nobody listens to us. We are not trading with one another. Intra-African trade is not anything beyond 15%, the lowest anywhere in the world. If you look at all our sectors and look at them, look at our agriculture, almost all African countries are net food importers. There is not a single African country that is in meaningful technology. Not a single African country produces a mobile phone. Yet the single most important ingredient in mobile telephony is to be found in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Not a single African country produces a car other than assembling completely knocked down kits. There is no meaningful production of pharmaceutical products in Africa. And if there was any doubt, COVID exposed it. All African countries, the 55 of them, are waiting to either receive Sinovac from China, Sputnik from Russia, AstraZeneca, Johnson or Moderna. And we don't even know what they are because our bureaus of standardization don't know. If you ask the Ethiopian Bureau of Standards what they are asking us to be injected with, they do not know. They just believe it is a vaccine because the Americans have said so or because the Chinese have said so. Africa is weak, so that even this magnificent edifice, I suspect, has not been erected by Ethiopian engineers. When I see the signage in Chinese, I suspect it is the Chinese. That is how weak we are. That is the reality of our mother continent. It is because we are politically weak, we are economically weak, socially we are disorganized, culturally and spiritually we are confused. That is the continent in which we are today. We unite or we perish. That as I travel along across the world, People do not care about our Tanzanianness or our Ghanaianness or our Kenyanness or our Ethiopianness. In their eyes, we are all Africans. And perhaps that is what we should use as the building block in order to talk about African unity. But we are not being naive about that unity. Because sometimes when we talk about Pan-Africanism and about African unity, people think we are being too simplistic about it. No, it is not being simplistic and being naive. It is recognizing that as long as we remain the way we are, then Africa in the next 25 years will be recolonized.
And that is the sad truth. In the next 25 years, Africa will be recolonized. And it's going to be recolonized by the Chinese because we see a push. Every corner in Africa, the Chinese have their foothold. As a matter of fact, a lot of Chinese citizens are being sent to Africa to colonize Africa. They say it's because they're running out of land in China, moving to Africa in groves, and they are setting up their own industries and making it possible for their future generation to thrive. So what are we doing as Africans, whether on the homeland or abroad? We're watching other people move in, as usual. The Afrikaners did it, and so many other various groups of people did it during slavery. And now we are looking at the Chinese coming in. Once again, another group of people are coming in to claim the African soil. Don't get me wrong. Everyone is entitled to live wherever he and she feels fit. But I'm just looking at the selling of Africa, the bigger picture. Professor Lumumba also spoke about the building that he was giving his speech in. I believe it was somewhere in Ethiopia. And he said even this beautiful building, he believes, was erected by the Chinese. That's how much we have outsourced everything that we're supposed to be giving these jobs to African citizens. But we are outsourcing. The Chinese are going into Africa and building all these buildings, erecting all these buildings. And they work with their own workers. They do not generally employ the natives to train them in agriculture or building construction. And so, like Professor Lumumba says, once again, we are at the precipice of losing our country again to another group of people. I think you guys know that Africa have more people in the world than a lot of these countries combined. Nigeria alone have over 217 million people just in Nigeria. So when Professor Lumumba spoke about cell phones not being produced in Africa, it's a come to Jesus moment, if you will, because you're talking about modern technology that everybody have in the palm of their hand these days. Everybody got a cell phone, even the smallest child, okay? And he says the most important ingredient in a cell phone comes from Africa. And yet, there's no African nation that produces a cell phone. That was so riveting. An eye-opening moment for everyone to realize what the stakes are in this game of Monopoly and this game of chess of the old world trying to conquer the new world. Europe and all these other countries trying to still conquer Africa, not through slavery this time around, but by the natural resources. They're going in there and they're getting the natural resources that Africans are not putting to use. Don't get me wrong. During slavery, they were taking out the natural resources. However, Slavery was free labor. Today, they don't have the free labor. Slavery was abolished, but all these countries are still going after the natural resources that are there in Africa. He also brought up the point of what's in the vaccine, because Europe and America and China and all these places are saying the vaccine is good, it combats certain diseases like COVID, etc. But he said, what is in the vaccine? These countries are not really saying, but expect the African leaders to buy up all these vaccines, even the ones that are expired or the one that's deemed not to be effective. And the sad part is they're buying it without any question. They're not questioning, is it good for my people? What is in the vaccine? I heard X, Y, and Z. Is it true? There's no question. They're just buying up these vaccines without researching whether or not it has all these immune side effects as claimed by a lot of doctors. So the Chinese are buying land and just has called Africa now their own. Because remember, at first it was the Africanos, you know, the Europeans who went to Africa and called themselves Africanos and took over portions of South Africa and various parts of Africa. I shouldn't say portions of South Africa. I think it would not be a stretch for me to say all of South Africa. Now the Chinese are doing the same. And so if Africans are not careful, Africa will be colonized again. And African leaders are just sitting back. They've got a few dollars in their pocket, but they're selling the African people out for a shilling, a penny, a dollar. YouTubers, drop your comments. What do you think? How do you feel about Pan-Africanism? I'm over now. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel and to this video. Thank you for watching.